Is it necessary to change your passwords often? Today's cybersecurity advice is to use strong, unique passwords on every single website. Hence my use of the word passwords, plural, implying more than one, in the title. And the best way to do this is with a password manager, and it's also recommended to enable two-factor authentication whenever possible. One of the age-old pieces of advice is to change your passwords every 3 to 6 months. But does changing your passwords every so often, when there isn't a real reason to, actually improve your security? The answer is actually no, and let me explain. What's the point of a password policy? It's to ensure strong passwords. Changing passwords regularly fights against that. The thing is, when people have to change their passwords every so often, they are more likely to cut corners, like using weak passwords, reusing passwords across accounts, and/or writing them down, or otherwise storing them in an insecure manner. Now, for clarity, what I'm saying doesn't apply to situations where your password has been compromised, or you have reason to suspect it's been compromised, or is just weak in the first place. In those cases, you should change your password ASAP. What I'm talking about is changing passwords every so often, just for the sake of changing them. The thing is, and keep this in mind, when you have weak passwords, changing them regularly does nothing to improve your security. And keep in mind that the advice to change your passwords regularly is old advice that was created in a time before we had password managers that can auto-generate and securely store strong passwords, and data breach monitors that can alert you when your information has been stolen in a data breach. Back then, two-factor authentication was pretty much not a thing. The advice to change your passwords regularly is based on the notion that when passwords are changed every so often, they are harder for a person to guess. The thing is, modern brute force attacks are much more sophisticated than that. Simply put, you're not up against a person, you're up against a computer. Take, for example, an 8-character password, which was once considered strong. A modern computer can crack that password in a matter of hours, far less than the 3 to 6 month standard intervals between password changes. And that's assuming that it has a mixture of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols, which, by the way, all your passwords should have. So what should you do to keep your account secure? The first and most important thing is use complex passwords, and the length is most important. Your passwords should be at minimum 12 characters long, and ideally 16 or more characters. And they should include a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Also, don't use actual words, because password cracking programs will do so-called dictionary attacks that will basically go through every word in the dictionary. And by the way, substituting characters like S's for dollar signs or I's for ones is no longer sufficient, as modern password cracking programs will try those variations too. The second most important thing is use unique passwords on every single account. No, seriously, every single account. The idea behind that is, if you use the same password on multiple accounts, if one of those websites has a data breach, multiple accounts are affected. But how are you supposed to keep track of all those passwords? Certainly you're not going to be able to remember them. Well, password manager. The one I use and recommend is Bitwarden. I've been using it for 4 years now. It's a great open source password manager. It stores your passwords in the cloud with AES 256-bit encryption, which is performed on device, so that only you can access them. and they sync across all your devices. They have apps for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, iOS, Android, as well as extensions for all the major web browsers. And of course, it does have a web version too. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by Bitwarden. This is a happy user's honest opinion. Another security best practice: use two-factor authentication wherever possible, and ideally using an offline authenticator app like Google Authenticator, which, in case you're unfamiliar, these apps generate verification codes offline on device based on the current time, making them immune to attacks where somebody activates a SIM card in your name and is able to receive your text messages. But the idea is, make sure your accounts never have a single port of entry. Again, wherever possible. I would also suggest signing up for something like Mozilla Monitor, which will send you an email notification when your email address is found in a data breach, so you know to change the password on the affected account or accounts ASAP. Following these best practices that I just mentioned is much more likely to keep you protected than changing your password every 3 to 6 months. In conclusion, changing your passwords often is old, outdated advice. Keep in mind that a 5-letter password was once considered secure. Then we went up to 8 characters, and now even that won't cut it. Well, that's because technology is constantly improving, and hackers are constantly getting more sophisticated. So our defenses have to keep constantly evolving to stay one step ahead of them. And in case you're thinking, oh, well, this is just one man's opinion, I'm not making this up. Many cybersecurity experts and even organizations like the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, no longer recommends regular password changes for the reasons I just mentioned. And they haven't been recommending it for a few years now. I'll leave a link to NIST's page explaining that in the description. Nowadays, the consensus is it's best to create a strong password once and then leave it alone unless you actually have a good reason to change it. Now, this video is targeted at the home user, but you can take most, if not all, these points and apply them to a business setting as well. And I'll touch on that real quick. Now I'm going to make this point again. If you make your users change their passwords regularly, what happens is your users will use less secure passwords and will have a harder time remembering those passwords, resulting in them writing them down or increased burden on your IT department due to more calls to reset passwords, which ultimately results in lost productivity, which means lost money. The point is, by expiring passwords, you are not only annoying your users, but you're actually encouraging the wrong kind of behavior. What makes this problem worse is that those prompts to change your password are almost guaranteed to come up at the worst possible time, when people need to get their work done. Remember that passwords are used by real people, not theoretical models. Instead of password expiration, I recommend setting password length and complexity requirements, paying particular attention to length. Set that to at least 12 characters, disallowing the use of already used passwords, as well as locking out accounts after 10 or so failed login attempts to prevent, or at least slow down, brute force attacks. It would also be a good idea to educate staff on the risks of reusing passwords across accounts, because the thing is, there's no way to automatically enforce that. I would also consider implementing a second form of authentication, such as one-time passwords or hardware security keys. Now, one might reason, well, you should be implementing these in conjunction with password expiration. Well, let me tell you what's going to end up happening. And if your organization does this, I guarantee you it's happening in your organization. People will take that same password and just put a number on the end, like old password 1, old password 2, old password 3, and so on and so forth, rendering that password expiration policy effectively moot. And that's it for this video. If you liked it, please be sure to hit that like button. If you thought what I said was completely wrong, tell me why in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share this video with your friends if you think they could benefit from seeing this video.